Hi everybody, I'm Michael. This is a review for Phantom of the Opera. It's a famous novel written in 1909 by Gaston Leroux. I know it's got millions of fans. People really love the play. People like the movies. I feel worried because I'm not going to say nice things about this book. I thought it was a bad book. I might go so far as to say it's terrible. There are some good things, but for the most part, it's not a good book, and I don't like it. So just a warning, if you really like this book, maybe you shouldn't watch my review, because I'm not going to say a lot of nice things about the book. I'm not sure what the problem is. I read the classic version of the book, so that would be the translation from 1909, and I feel like that translation is not the best. It assumes you know some French, and I do not speak French, but it assumes you know and understand several French things. Like, what's the difference between the Vicomte and the Comte? I don't know. The book assumes you already know that. The Victum, I don't even know how to pronounce these words. This book needs a pronunciation guide too, actually. But the Philippe is the I think he's the Comte, or is he the Vicomte? I don't know. See, I don't know what the difference is between those two things, and so I can't tell you which one is which. But the two characters are the brothers, Philippe and Raoul. Raoul's being the main character. His older brother, Philippe, is sort of an unimportant character. Like, he shows up quite a bit towards the start, and it feels like he's going to be an important character, but he just sort of gets forgotten. And that happens with a lot of characters which show up towards the start, like Sorelli, and just tons of characters at the very start of the book. You can kind of tell that this book was written in a serialized form, which means the author wrote like 1 to 2 chapter chunks. So like every month he'd write 2 chapters. I don't know specifically how much he wrote per month, but I think that was the writings, that was the setup. And you can kind of tell because, well, you got characters who are important, and then the author kind of changes their mind and decides, no, actually this Meg character, forget her, she's not important. Sorelli, yeah. And then Joseph, who cares about him? And that's probably makes this book very confusing for high schoolers who are forced to read the book, because it's got so many characters just right at the start who won't become important again. And that's something which, it's not the worst, but it does bug me. Something this book does at the start too is Joseph I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. Joseph Bouquet, I guess. He's murdered. He's murdered at the end of chapter 1. And at the end of chapter 2 as well. That's the big cliffhanger. So the first 2 chapters, big cliffhanger is that Joseph was murdered by the Phantom of the Opera. So he's a stage manager. He was murdered by the Phantom of the Opera, hung to death, and the Phantom steals the rope. So they see the dead body, and they go to get a ladder to save him. And in the meantime, the Phantom comes back, steals the rope, drops the body on the ground, and leaves. And you'd think that would be a big deal, right? Phantom just killed somebody at the very start of the book. Everybody makes a big deal out of it. And then the book proceeds to forget about it for 300 pages. So that's something I see in mysteries occasionally, where somebody gets murdered at the end of chapter 1. And then the book completely forgets about it, because it's not really important to the story. It was just there as a cliffhanger, just to catch readers' interest and draw them in. And that usually happens with mystery stories. And I really dislike it when stuff like that happens. That's generally something that makes me really mad when a mystery does that. It's usually not a sign of a good mystery when there's a big murder and it's not important to the story. And like 300 pages in, the book will casually dismiss Joseph's death as, well, by accident he stumbled upon the Phantom's torture room and just died automatically. And yeah, so that's something I didn't really like about I really didn't like that. So that's not good. Something else that happens at the start is that the author insists this is a 100% real life story, which is not true. This is a fake story. It's totally made up. Some of the things did happen. Like, there was, in fact, a chandelier which fell down and killed a woman. I think it was a woman. You can check the internet. There's all sorts of stuff about it, but that's sort of what inspired the author to write this book. And there is a lake underneath the opera house in real life. I think those are like the two big things which are in the book, which are there in real life. But come on, a murdering ghost in the opera? No, that can't be real, can it? Could it? The setting's okay. I wish the setting, this would work much better in the movie, and maybe that's why the movie's popular, is, one of the storylines is that the Phantom has a private box, box number 5, and he orders nobody can use this box but me. And whenever somebody tries to sit in the box, the Phantom will cause problems. The Phantom will whisper in their ear, "Go away," or, whisper threatening things like that. But when you look around, nobody's there. It's completely empty. And the solution, we're told at the end of the book, is that the column in this box, it's got this really large column which is hollow, and the Phantom hid inside, and that's how the Phantom was able to talk to people without being seen. And that's an okay explanation. I cannot recall that column ever being mentioned at any point in the book until that solution. And that's something else which kind of bugs me whenever a mystery does that, is it's like, oh, the solution hinged upon this really important detail that I forgot to tell you. It's like, that always feels like a cheater solution when mysteries do that. And the book pulls that. Now, it's possible that I just misread that particular thing. I just missed the part where they mentioned, by the way, there's a 4-foot column, 4 feet wide. I don't know. I feel like I would have picked up on that detail had it been mentioned that there's a giant column in the middle of the booth. They do spend a fair amount of time talking about it, and that's another problem with this book. Oh, gosh. Is it doesn't really know what the story is. It doesn't really know what a story is. It's got a big romance story, which is okay. And it's kind of got the scary ghost story. That's probably the best part, is that we've got this murdering monster causing problems. But the way that plays out is sort of with these two new managers of the opera, and they're sort of a joke. They're kind of dumb, and they're trying to solve the opera ghost mystery, because they take over the opera, and they get told, oh, by the way, there's an opera ghost. He has a list of ransom demands, basically. He says, nobody can use box number 5, and you have to pay me 200 francs a month. And what does the Phantom need the money for? Seriously, I don't know why the Phantom needs huge amounts of money. That doesn't make sense to me. The way that any of these characters live their lives doesn't make sense to me, because none of them seem to have jobs. We've got a bunch of people who work at the opera, yeah, but they can just not do their jobs and it's fine. Like, Christine disappears for 2 weeks and nobody questions it. I was actually surprised to find out that it was 2 weeks that she disappears, because the book acts like, okay, she was gone a night. But no, you'd think somebody would have noticed. If I did not show up to work unannounced for 2 weeks, somebody would have done something. Somebody would have said something. In fact, the only person who notices her or cares about her absence is Raoul, and he goes to her mother, and she's like, oh yeah, she's been gone for 2 weeks, yeah. Don't know where she is. I think she went off with an angel to heaven. Something else I don't like about the book is we have multiple characters like that, like the mother. In fact, is it just the No, I was gonna say, is this book sexist? Because there are 2 female characters like that. It's the mother, Mother Valerius, I think her name is, and then there's Mother Geary, and they are both really, really dumb women. And they're just like, oh, the ghost is real, angels are real, it's the Phantom ghost, it's really cool. And that's something which annoys me, is that trying to question these characters is like pulling teeth. It's kind of painful to read. If anybody gave like a straight, direct answer, I would be shocked. And that's sort of how the mystery is drawn out, is that people speak indirectly. And Raoul does this too, right? So when the police come, the police are like, okay, who do you think kidnapped Christine? And Raoul's like, it was the angel of music! And why is Raoul being really stupid here? Like, he could have said, well, no, it's Christine's tutor who kidnapped her. He's been secretly, stalking her for 3 months now. He kidnapped her before. Like, that would be a nice, considered answer, but instead, Raoul goes straight for Angel of Music, who plays the magical violin in the graveyard. And the police just like, okay, you're crazy. Next. Yeah, so a lot of characters, that's something which happens a lot, is that the characters will go for the most outlandish, most confusing answer rather than like the more direct answer that makes sense. This is especially the case with Madame Geary, where she's being questioned by the opera managers, and those guys are both kind of dopes too. So it was a really tough conversation. It's like, I wish that I could have been there and I could have directed the questions in the conversation and maybe gotten some actual answers instead of characters just babbling. So, yeah, that's something I don't like when that happens in mysteries. It's like when a character will say, I saw an angel, and instead of giving the actual answer is, okay, I saw somebody dressed in white robes walking around. That's an Encyclopedia Brown mystery, isn't it? Yeah, it's like he thinks he saw this ghost in a wedding veil. Yeah, that's one of the Encyclopedia Brown mysteries. It's like, no, guys, just give a straightforward answer. Tell what you saw. Say exactly what you saw. Don't jump to conclusions and say it's a ghost. Oh, that happens a lot in mysteries. And this book does kind of go into that. It's like, whenever something bad goes wrong, people blame it on the opera ghost. The opera ghost, who is a scary person who haunts the theater. Something this book does right is that the opera ghost is a scary person. He's very terrifying. He's a hideous monster. He has a death's head that gets said over and over again, and he has no eyes except when the lights are out, and then his eyes just burst into flames. It's just really scary. He's got this frail skin skeletal body. He has no nose. He has no hair except for like 4 strands of hair. And that's very different from the movie, as I understand it. As I understand it, the movie, he's a really, really hot guy, except for this. He wears a tiny little mask over his eye, but the rest of his face is fantastic, and he looks amazing. But in this book, he is a monster. He is very clearly a hideous monster. In fact, he doesn't wear a mask for most of the book. We only get told about his mask during the kidnapping. So that's like 200 pages in, just interestingly enough. So yeah, that's a difference. I imagine they probably changed the characters of Raoul and Christine. Even the author seems to change the character of Christine. She seems to waffle back and forth between, like she starts off as, oh, I believe in angels and stuff like that. But then later on, she gets more realistic and develops more of a personality and is more grounded. I really liked it. I liked her more when she wasn't being all, flighty. Raoul is flighty throughout the whole thing. So he just like changes emotions at the drop of a hat. So I think his introduction is probably the best way to explain this. So Raoul goes to the opera and he sees Christine, and they used to be best friends as kids. They spent several happy years together. He hasn't seen her in, I think, 5 years or so. So the first thing he does is he wants to go to her and says, I love you. I can't live without you. That's his personality. Like, has he talked to her in the past 5 years? No, but he's already decided he can't live without her. And so it's a lot like Romeo and Juliet in that sense. It's like extreme emotions without any real grounding. I mean, sure, they really do like each other. And when they do, become closer together. It is kind of sweet. There are some nice elements to their romance, but man, for the most part, Raoul is just he just wavers between two emotions. One is like, he is so lovesick, he loves her, he can't live without her. And the other one is, he is super jealous and he hates her, and she's the worst person ever. He just jumps back and forth between the two of them, even in this very first chapter. So what happens is that she faints. I forget why she faints, but there's a doctor there, and he goes to check up on her. And she says, no, go away. I don't know who you are. Go away. And he lurks outside her dressing room like a creepy person, and he hears her talking to somebody. She's like, oh, I performed for you, my love. I love you so much. And Merle's like, my love? How dare she love another man? I'm like, calm down, dude. You're seeing her for the first time in 5 years, okay? And she leaves the room, and of course he bursts into the room. He's like, where is this guy? I want to beat him up. And nobody's there because it's the opera ghost. And yeah. So Raoul basically follows. So she does send him a letter like a few days afterwards saying, actually, yeah, Raoul, I do know who you are. I was just pretending, because there's a crowd there. You should meet me at my father's gravesite. I'm going there. And she fails to mention, oh, actually, I'm going out of town to the gravesite because I have a secret meeting with the opera ghost. Why did she fail to mention that? But she does. And so she just kind of goes there, and that's when they sort of become friends. But they kind of have a fight because he keeps jumping through emotions. It's like, who was the guy you were talking to? And she's like, I can't believe you were spying on me. And then she runs away, and there's lots of drama, and then she comes back later on. And they have another conversation, and she's really scared of the opera ghost. She doesn't want to tell him about the opera ghost. I feel like this could have been done better, but it is a good angle that she really wants him to help her and to free her from the obsessive grasp of the opera ghost, because the opera ghost is obsessed with her and wants to marry her, and she wants to be saved, but at the same time she doesn't want to risk Raoul's life because she really does love him and care about him. I feel like that angle is a good angle, but it could have been done better because the way it plays out is just a lot of Raoul getting really mad at her and flip-flopping between loving her and getting mad at her, and a lot of Christine just keeping secrets when, as I said, she could have been straightforward from the very start, and that would have saved a lot of time. So she sneaks out of the house at 2 in the morning, and he follows her to the graveyard, and there's this beautiful music coming from the grave. It's the opera ghost hiding behind, I think it's a pile of skulls, which is really creepy. And then he attacks Raoul and ties Raoul up on the altar of the local church, and that's really creepy too. Yeah, and actually takes a Raoul, I don't know, I'm not sure at which point our characters realize that the mysterious person who's obsessed with Christine is the opera ghost. I'm not sure when they make the connection. It's pretty obvious because the book is called Phantom of the Opera, and we were told about this scary, murderous ghost. Gee, maybe he is the same person who's following Christine around. The opera ghost is somewhat nice to her in that he gives her singing lessons. He helps her become a great singer, and that's really nice, but he never lets her see him. He's always hiding behind a wall or something like that, or inside the pillar. And later on, at the end of the book, we're told there's a series of tubes which allows him to listen to different areas and also project his voice in different areas. So that's how he's able to make himself be heard backstage in the dressing room, while at the same time he can be heard in booth number 5, which is okay. Another problem with the book is it jumps around too much with there are two main storylines. The opera managers and the Raoul and the Christine storyline. And the Raoul and Christine storyline is probably the better one. It's definitely the better one. But, yeah. So let's see. With the manager storyline, it interrupts towards the end. So Christine gets kidnapped. She gets kidnapped twice. So I'll just go through the book in order, right? So I just talked about what happened at the graveyard. And then Christine gets kidnapped for 2 weeks after that. And like I said, the book acts like it was just one day that she got kidnapped and nobody looks for her or anything. And, you know, Raoul's just about despaired because his love has left him forever. But then he gets a note saying, okay, you can meet me at this masquerade ball. And he goes there and she's really, really secretive and wearing a mask. It's the same thing in the graveyard where it's like, I'm going to tell you half-truths instead of telling you the whole truth because I'm really, really scared. Yeah, it was okay. I like the Phantom in that segment. He's dressed as the Mask of Red Death, which is an Edgar Allan Poe story, and that was really nice. It probably worked well because he's already got Death's head. And there's a pretty cool visual in that scene where Raoul leaves the room, but then he goes back to spy on her again. And, you know, he hears her singing with the Phantom, and they sing the most beautiful song. And then she goes up to the mirror, and suddenly there's not just one of her. There's two of her, because there's her reflection. And then there's 4 and 8, and then there's 20 Christines in the room, and they're all around the room, and they just basically flood his vision. And that would be a really cool visual. I imagine in the movie they do that, and it's amazing. It's gotta be, right? And she just disappears, and he doesn't know where she went, and she doesn't know where she went either. It is explained later on that it's just a moving mirror. So like you like press this, turn this, and the mirror pops open. That's how it works. So it's like a mechanical mirror. I'm still not sure how there's a mechanical mirror in that particular room of that particular masquerade, because like I don't think the book was clear enough on that. Like, did this masquerade happen in the opera house, or did it happen in a completely different part of town? Because the book makes it seem like it's happening in a completely different part of town, in which case, how does the Phantom of the Opera have a secret passage built in some other person's house in some other part of town? I didn't quite understand that. Now, with the Phantom, he does have a bunch of secret passageways that allow him to get through the opera. He's not really a phantom, he's a real person using secret passageways, and he's making his voice appear using his little tubes. He's also a ventriloquist, so at one point he humiliates Carlotta, another character who seems like she was really, really important and then just disappears for a good portion of the book. So he humiliates her by making her voice go croak, 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 like a toad when she's in the middle of singing. Yeah, so that's another thing he does. Anyway, the big famous thing he does that happens around this time of the book, he steals a horse. That's not the important thing, though. Sorry, he stole the horse earlier. He stole the horse right before the 2-week kidnapping. There's a horse, by the way. There are 12 horses. Apparently, the opera house comes complete with a horse stable with 12 horses, and the managers are like, really? Where do you keep 12 horses in this place? And I would like to know the answer to this question. Is this opera house huge or something? Now, we're told there are 5 layers to the cellar. There's just 5 layers there. And so there are a bunch of hidden passageways and things just naturally. But that was something which was okay. I didn't like it too much. I think the author... That's something... I have mixed feelings. So the author did a good job with the setting of the opera house, but I think the author overdid it. So I think the author was going for like this dark gothic sense of, because this is considered like a gothic romance, and with this creepy old opera house and with all its hidden passageways and twists and turns. I thought that was good and it worked well with the opera ghost going from place to place. But the chapter describing that is, where is it? Well, it's towards the end of the book. It's just a giant chapter. It's just like the author puts the story on hold for 20 pages to describe the layout of the opera house. And it's way too late, because this is 250 pages into the book. It's like, why are you just now telling us how the opera house was laid out? And it's not really a layout in the sense of, oh, he's explaining this is here and this is there. No, it's like the characters are going through the maze, going through different layers of the cellar, and it's really hard to figure out how these various areas connect to each other. I did not quite figure that out. The Persian seems to know, but we don't really. I could not follow at all. So we go through at least 4 different layers. So we never saw the horse stables, did we? But yeah, there's a scenery area where like a bunch of old people live. And then there's an area with like a secret agent who, you know, we're told like this person's skulking about wearing a cape, and it's not the opera ghost, but it's somebody that the author has been forbidden to tell us about due to state secrets. That was a weird page. That was a weird thing to point out. And then there's somebody with a flaming head. The head was on fire, almost attacking our heroes, and it turns out it's just a rat catcher holding a lamp, which I thought was weird. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't like the segment where they explored the opera. That went on for too long, and part of the problem was they spent like 5 pages going through the opera, but that was just going to an office. And then they spend another 15 pages getting to the actual important place. And the important place is where Joseph died, the 3rd floor cellar, actually. So I feel like they took a really weird roundabout way. I did see one complaint about... Yeah, this will bring me to another complaint. So one complaint is that the Persian says, Raoul, you need to hold your gun like this, like in front of your head, like this. And Raoul's like, my arms hurt. This makes my arms tired. Could I not do that? And the Persian's like, no, you have to do it. He's like, but why? No, you have to do it. And we don't get... I mean, number one, Raoul is such a whiny pants, and he's going after this murdering kidnapper. Why is he complaining so much about having a gun? But number two, it's explained later, like 25 pages later. The opera just happens to be really, really good at lassoing. That's a weird thing, but the opera ghost has a lasso that he likes to throw. So you have to hold your hands like this. That way, if the opera ghost throws a lasso at you, you can easily escape from the lasso. But if you're holding the gun like this, then your arms would be stuck to your side, and then you couldn't escape from the lasso. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Makes some sense. Why didn't the Persian just say, you have to hold your arms like that because there's a lasso? He could have explained that at the start instead of waiting 25 pages before getting to the explanation. And that's a complaint that I'm driving at, is the book does that a lot, where they do things backwards. The explanation comes backwards in a sense, so there can be a mystery. Like if we explain the start to finish, the story from start to finish, it wouldn't have been mysterious. So, you know, if the Persian had said, well, you know, we're trying to protect ourselves from a lasso, then there wouldn't have been a mystery as to why we have to walk in such a weird fashion. So a great example of that is the second part with the managers. Oh man, so that's another problem is Christine is kidnapped, and this time she's kidnapped. She's kidnapped a second time. She's kidnapped for real, and it's very dangerous, and the book just goes, whoa, pause! You guys want to go back to the managers, right? You want to hear what's going up with them and paying ransom money to the opera ghost? Huh? You want to do that? And I think absolutely nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted to hear about the opera managers. But instead, we get this forever long segment with the opera managers. And it does it backwards. So the managers that night are acting strange, and they don't want anybody to touch them, and they're walking backwards. They demand to have a safety pin. A safety pin, I say. And was someone killed? I think somebody was killed, and they try to warn the managers that somebody was killed. Somebody else was killed. Opera Ghost kills a lot of people, so there's Joseph at the very start, and like I said, the book completely ignores that. The same night that there's the croaking sound coming out of the actress's voice, the opera ghost tells the managers, hey, if you don't give me box number 5, something bad is going to happen. A chandelier falls and kills someone. Did I mention that already? Anyway, so with the manager's storyline, the opera ghost demands the 20,000 francs per month from them, and we get them acting strange before we get the explanation of what's going on. It's actually a weird explanation, and then it jumps back in time, like 1 month earlier. What happened was they gave the $20,000 after the chandelier incident. They gave the 20,000 francs to Madame Geary, and she put they gave her an envelope with the money, and they followed her, and she put the envelope on the ledge of box number 5. And then they watched it, and they watched it and watched it, and nobody came and touched it. And finally somebody opened it up, and they, oh my gosh, found a bunch of fake money inside. What happened to the real 20,000 francs? And so this month, they actually talked to Madame Geary, and they get an explanation, which is she switched envelopes. Even though she was being watched the whole time, everybody was very closely watching her, she somehow managed to slip envelopes because there's an envelope in her sleeve. Well, what did she do with the real envelope? She put it inside the pocket of the manager, which makes 0 sense to me. It makes 0 sense. It's like, okay, she takes his money and then secretly puts the money back in his pocket. That way, the opera ghost can steal the money from his pocket. Like, 2 unnecessary steps there. That's why I think, anyway. So he uses a safety pin to put the money, to keep the money safe in his pocket. That's the idea. He puts a safety pin on the envelope and ties it to his pocket. Now, something I thought was kind of foolish is that it's like the pocket. It's not like, it's the pocket of his tailcoat, so it's a pocket that's almost touching the ground. So if somebody put their hand in the pocket, you wouldn't be able to feel it. Why didn't he just move the money to a different pocket? Move the envelope to a different pocket. Would have saved a lot of hassle. Definitely. But instead he leaves it in his pocket, and as I said, they try to walk backwards and let nobody touch them because they don't want anybody to get close enough to take the envelope of money in the pocket. That's why they were acting so strangely. And I think it's the last chapter. Something else the book does is last chapter wraps up all the loose ends, and I feel like several of those loose ends should have been wrapped up earlier, but that's just my opinion. Just that's how I would have done it if I had done the mystery. So there's like a hidden trap door inside the manager's office, so Phantom just stuck his hand through the trap door, grabbed the envelope from the pocket, grabbed the money out of the envelope, and then just put the fake money inside the envelope. Which, yeah, manager just didn't notice somebody rummaging around in his pocket, because like I said, it's like the tailcoat pocket. So far back, he couldn't have noticed it. Yeah, and so that's a really long interlude. I guess it works, but it doesn't really. It should have come way earlier in the book. What the book should have done, I think, is done a better job of balancing the manager story with the Christine story. Because what happens is Christine gets kidnapped, and then we get like 30 pages of this envelope and the safety pin, and they won't stop talking about it, and it's not at all interesting. Somebody has just been kidnapped, okay? Gosh, all right. So the second time Christine gets kidnapped, she's kidnapped for real, and the ghost takes her to he's got a house on a lake, which is underneath the opera. He's got a secret house, and you can only travel across it. You can only reach it by boat, and you have to travel past a devilish trap that he set up. A devilish trap indeed. The sirens, something to do with sirens. And we're later on told, oh, it's just got like an electrical signal. So if somebody passes over that part of the lake, like a bell rings in the Phantom's house, and he's like, oh, better set the trap, run, set the trap and leave. That's the explanation for it. So it's not like he's a ghost who's constantly haunting that area. No, he's got an alarm system, and that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes enough sense. But I just mentioned that, you know, that's the part where we go on, like, the 20 pages of exploring various parts of the opera, including the head of fire and the other stuff. And it's like, whew, boy. So anyway, the Persian. So there's a character called the Persian who, like, gets mentioned once or twice in the first half of the novel. Suddenly shows up at the end. He's like, hey, I'm going to be your narrator for the next 60 pages. And I'm not explaining anything until the final chapter. That's really annoying. That's the biggest offender of something didn't get explained until the final chapter. It's definitely all the stuff that the Persian fails to explain. That is the most annoying part of that. So apparently, gosh, I can't even, he doesn't even give the basic introduction, which is, hey, guess what? I knew this Phantom Erik in Persia. We were friends in Persia. The final chapter gives the backstory. So they were in Persia. The Persian man was some sort of chief of police or something. And Erik, that's the Phantom's name, he happened to be, gosh, I don't know. He was with a traveling fair because he's so hideous. So he worked for a traveling circus for a while. And, you know, he got really good at the lasso. And then he worked in Persia. And he worked as a government secret agent, destroying, basically killing enemies of state. And he made really lifelike robots. That's something which is really strange and doesn't... I mean, it gets introduced at the last chapter, so we don't really get enough time to follow through on the whole lifelike robots thing. That's odd. But eventually he knew so much that they tried to execute him. Persian saved his life, and then they went on to Turkey and did the exact same thing, and then they came over here to France. Whereas he was there, he created his... Yeah, what he did was he made a series of tunnels in the Sultan's house in Persia, and he did the same thing when they were building the opera. He built a bunch of hidden tunnels for himself so he could get around, and he built his marvelous house on the lake. Yeah, so that's sort of his backstory, and as I said, that doesn't get explained until the very end. The Persian's just like, hey, guess what? I'm a character you've never met before. I know all about the opera's ghost secrets. No, I'm not telling you the secrets. Come on, follow me. Just do whatever I say for 50 pages. 60. So I didn't like that at all. Skipped a couple of things. So Raoul's brother gets murdered sort of off screen. Like his brother thinks that Raoul ran away with Christine when he hears Christine's been kidnapped. So he thinks, oh, not the 2-week kidnapping. This is like the 3-minute kidnap. Okay, one night kidnapping. It is odd that nobody cares about her first kidnapping, the 2-week kidnapping, but the second kidnapping, suddenly everybody's all up in arms about it. And Raoul's brother's like, oh, Raoul probably kidnapped her to run away with her and marry her, and I won't let that happen. And that's why the brother Philippe is not a very good character, is because he does have the setup scene. He shows up like twice or 3 times, but he barely affects the story, and it feels like it's setting up for this big confrontation between the two brothers, because the one brother really wants to marry Christine, and his older brother says, no, you cannot marry Christine under any circumstances. So Philippe sort of runs off, and he gets, like, murdered off screen. Another thing that happens is Christine and Raoul, this is kind of silly, but Christine decides, hey, what if we pretend we're engaged? We can pretend we're gonna get married. It'll be so much fun, honey. And he's like, okay, sweetie. And then they play at being engaged for a couple of weeks. And then she was like, oh no, wait, he actually likes this. He likes me. Oh man, darn. Oh, geez. It's like, what? She's surprised when he falls in love with her while pretending they're gonna get married. He was already in love with you, Christine. How did you think that pretending to be engaged to him would somehow make him like you less? It doesn't make any sense. So she decides to tell him everything in secret in this like halfway point of the book. So she takes him to the roof in the opera. Like, we know the villain is the opera ghost who can hear and see everything that happens in the opera, but she still takes him up to the roof and assumes, hey, this is a safe place. He'll never hear us there. Wait, what's that shadow? I thought I heard somebody talk. Probably nothing. Let me keep going with my story. And then she tells him the story of how she met Erik, who talked to her. You know, he pretended to be an angel talking through walls, but no, he was actually a ghost, a phantom. And, you know, it was okay. And he gave her a ring because he wants to marry her, and she explains how he kidnapped her for 2 weeks, and she actually feels kind of bad for the guy. And that's when Raoul and Christine decide they're going to run away together tomorrow, not right now. And it would make so much sense if they just left right now and went away. But no, they stay for one extra night, which gives the opera ghost enough time to kidnap Christine. And as I said, everybody takes that second kidnapping very, very seriously. Except for half the cast, who is involved with this ridiculous storyline about a safety pin. Yep. So they go through the Phantom secret lair. So they go to the place where Joseph was killed. Remember Joseph, the guy who was killed for no reason at the end of chapter 1? Well, the Persian just happens to find a new secret passage there near where Joseph's body was, opens up the secret passage, and it leads directly into the opera ghost's house. But oh no, it leads into the torture room! The torture room! This guy has a torture room. I thought this was weird. I thought this was an extremely weird idea. I didn't quite understand it. The idea is that there are 6 mirrors, and there's also a tree. That's the torture room. Like, when you look in the mirror, you see the reflection of the tree and then a bunch of different trees, right? All the other reflections, because the mirrors are in a hexagon, so they reflect onto each other. So there's a bunch of different trees. You see a bunch of different trees. And that's the torture. It's supposed to drive you crazy, because wherever you look, it looks like you're in a forest, but oh no, the trees aren't real. There's only one tree. And this will drive you so insane that you will kill yourself. That's the idea of the torture room. And something along the lines of, like, there's a light bulb which makes the room hotter and hotter as time goes on. So our characters spend like 18 hours in the mirror room looking for a way out. And the way out is there's a nail on the floor, you just pull the nail, and then you escape. That's it. Oh, man. Yeah, the book really slowed down at that part. They do get like a little conversation with Christine because she's on the other side of the wall, because the opera ghost has captured her and demands that she be his wife, but she gets to make the decision. She does get a 24-hour time limit. So they get to have a minor conversation with Christine, but then the opera ghost comes back and interrupts. So once they finally escape the torture room, they find another room which is filled with barrels. It's a bunch of gunpowder, and they're like, oh no, he's going to blow up the entire opera house. And so, like, Christine, this is another weird thing. Christine has to make her decision by turning a scorpion or a grasshopper. She can't just say, yes, I'll marry you, or no, I won't marry you. She has to turn a grasshopper or a scorpion. And they're both connected to some sort of electrical machine, something along the lines. So the one of them just like sets off sparks in the room with all the barrels, which will cause the great big explosion. The other one fills the room with water. And fortunately, she picks the right one. And it is kind of interesting where the book indicates that they can't trust Erik because he's a murderous monster. So it's like, is he really telling the truth? Or is he lying to her? Like, maybe he thinks she's gonna say no, so he switched the grasshopper and the other one on her. You know, like, which one is connected to which? We're not entirely sure. Maybe no matter which option she picks, the opera house is going to explode. That was a good possibility. That'd be kind of cool for a video game puzzle. Actually, it's like, okay, try to pick which faucet do you turn, which handle do you turn in order to not kill everyone. That would be cool. So, fortunately, Christine picks the right one, and the room fills with water, and then Christine, the Persian and Raoul almost escape. I mean, they almost get killed in the water, but I think they wake up in the opera ghost's house, and then they leave. I'm totally forgetting what happened after that. But that's like the end of the opera ghost. His like heart is broken. He sees that Christine really belongs with Raoul, and Christine and Raoul escape, and they're never seen again. And the opera ghost dies of a broken heart 3 days later, and we're sort of left to pity him. Even though he's really a monster. I did mention, like, the movies try to make him more of this, like, tragic character, sort of like Quasimodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is also a French novel, where, you know, like, he's really a good person, but he's just hideous, and that's what makes him do bad things. But, no, the opera ghost is pretty much a monster. This book plays it more along the lines of, like, he's a monster. He's not really tortured by his ugliness. He is tortured by his ugliness. He gets really mad, but it's funny. TV Tropes says that Erik, he talks in the third person whenever he's angry. So often. I thought that was a hilarious way to put it. It's like, yeah, he does get angry and talk in the third person an awful lot. He's just this really mean, murderous person. I guess the best thing you could say about him is that even though he kidnaps this woman repeatedly, at least he doesn't do anything mean to her. Like, he basically treats her like a queen, even though she's captured. He treats her very, very nicely and doesn't do anything inappropriate towards her. So that's probably the nicest thing. Still, this has been a long review. I think I've explained enough. That I've probably forgotten one or two details. Certainly, it is a very long book. Did I mention the translation was kind of bad too? I forget if I did that or not, because this has been a long review. Translation could be fixed. The translation definitely could be improved, because it assumes you know French, and I don't know French. And so I was confused by some of the elements in that sense. So yeah, that's the Phantom of the Opera. I did not enjoy this book. It does have some good things, but I have to imagine they made a lot of changes in order to make this like a really, really good movie. I think there's like two movies, right? There's a really big romance movie, and then there's the horror film version with Lon Chaney, I think. And that makes sense that they would go for the big scary, make it a big scary movie, because the Phantom is a monster. He's just, ugh. So yeah, because that's what I would push, because that was one of the good elements of the book, was the Phantom being quite scary. Didn't like the other characters. I think the managers, they could have been funny. I feel like, again, I don't know if it's translation issues or if it's the fact that this book is like 20 years old at this point, but the managers could have been really funny, and I could definitely see a movie or a play version where the managers are just flat out hilarious, and their bungling attempts to catch the opera ghost are so bad they backfire. It's like, that could have been really hilarious, whereas in this book it was more like, wow, this is such an annoying interruption. Christine just got kidnapped. Could we go back to the kidnapping instead of just 30 pages of a safety pin? And so I could definitely see a version where they're really funny, and that just counterbalances the scariness and the tension of Christine being kidnapped. You can see that as like a reliever. Like, you know, whenever things get too dark and serious, we have the comic relief, and it's like, okay, yeah, just to settle things down a bit, because that could have worked really well. But instead, okay, I just got interrupted while recording the video, and good thing I did, because I've been talking for about 50 minutes now. Time to really wrap this thing up. So, I did not like this book. I thought it was a very poor book, although it has some really good elements to it. I feel like a rewrite would have made it better, or just a different translation probably could have made this better, because I can see how it's got good enough elements which would lead to good movies, like change the manager so instead of being annoying and interrupting the story, make them so they're funny comic relief. I think that's what the author was trying to go for. Change Raoul so instead of just being this guy who fluctuates between extreme emotions, just make him more realistic. Have the characters be more straightforward and, highlight the things that really work, because Christine's fear of the opera ghost really works. Christine being flighty and saying, "Oh, it's an angel, it's amazing." That's not interesting. Christine going, "If I tell you, he's going to kill you. You can't tell anybody Erik's name." That worked. So focus on that stuff. Make it like a scary story. I'm told the play focuses on the romance. Sure, maybe the love triangle could be a big thing to focus on too. But anyway, just throwing out ideas that there are some things in this book that work, and they can, obviously they have done adaptations of this book which are popular and which work well. But I just don't think this original book works well. I think it's quite poor. I know it's a classic novel, but I did not like it, so I'm sorry. I'd probably give this book like a 2 out of 10, 1 star out of 5. Yeah, I think that's what I do. So thanks for watching my review. Sorry I talked for way too long. I imagine people are gonna like watching this review because this book has a ton of fans, and so I think the fans are so fond of this book they wouldn't mind sitting through a 50-minute review. I just lost track of time. My mistake. Although are the fans of the book gonna really dislike this review because it's like 15 minutes of me talking about, oh, I don't really like the book so much. I'm not sure. Anyway, bye.